garden friends. It's a beautiful Friday and it is time, actually it's late, but it is time for me to start my sunflowers, my squash, cucumbers, all my cucurbits. It is time. The weather is nice, but I think we're gonna have our last cold spell tonight and tomorrow, and these guys need to get in their pods and out into the garden. So come join me as I show you my process. Yeah, it is. So it's actually May 10th here in Southwest Michigan. We're in Berry County, and if I would have had done this perfectly, I actually would have started all the plants that I'm starting today. I would have started them about 2 to 3 weeks ago because I would want to put them out in the garden at the beginning of next week. We're gonna have our last cold spell, I believe, here this weekend down in the low 40s, and they will be ready to go out that week after. But you know, as life has it, you don't always get things done right when you plan. So we're doing it today. And the nice thing about all the things we're planting today is that they germinate really quickly, especially when you start them indoors on a heat mat. And then they grow fast. These are all fast growers, cucumbers and squash, and specifically summer squash. Winter squash can take a lot longer, obviously, to develop, but your summer squash, the pro-cut sunflowers that I'm using, cucumbers, all those things germinate and grow like in 50 to 60 days, which is perfect timing, honestly. So yes, I would have rather got them out earlier, but hey, you got to make the most of the time you have. So that's what we're doing today. And what I want to show you is I am making my own seed starting mix. If you've watched any of my videos from earlier this season, I've been doing a lot of soil blocking, which I have absolutely loved. I love that process. There were maybe some slight learning curves, but I felt like we overcame those quickly. But for all the seeds I'm doing today, they're much bigger seeds. And unless I want to do use a ton of soil blocking mix for those 2-inch soil blockers, which I don't, starting them in my little trays is really the way to go. So I have found that I think it's like 12 times as much soil that you use in the 2-inch soil blocks versus the little 3/4 inch. You hardly use any soil for those at all, which is great. That soil mix that I initially made lasted forever, but the 2-inch soil blocks take up a ton more, and I just don't want to use that much because they're not going to be in that block for very long. So I have these little, I think they're 1 inch by 1 inch as far as the perimeter here, and then their depth is about 2 inches. Okay. So these are actually perfect for having these guys in here for 2-3 weeks tops. And they're really easy to get the soil in, and I'll show you all that process here in this video. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually mix my soil that I'm using, and I'm going to have to sift it first because since we're starting seeds, a sifted soil is a lot better to get any wood chips or chunks out. And since these seeds are better, they're not as fussy as maybe your tiny seeds. But that being said, there's less space in the little soil pot since you're using a bigger seed. So I want to try to get out those big chunks so I have a nice fine seed starting mix. So what I'm using is peat moss. It is my go-to starter mix. I also use it for my soil blocking. This will be a very similar recipe to my soil blocking mix, except it's going to be more lightweight because I'm going to add some vermiculite to it. And when you're soil blocking, you want a really nice kind of dense soil so that it holds its shape. But I don't necessarily need that since I'm using these containers or pots for starting the seeds. So the 3 ingredients I'll be using is composted or finished manure. Make sure it is composted or finished so that you don't burn your tiny seedlings with too hot of a compost. If it's like fresh compost will be too hot, it will literally, the nitrogen in it will literally burn the roots of your plants. So you want to make sure it's a finished or a composted manure. So I've got that. I have some peat moss, which is actually pre-moistened, so I don't have to mix in the water. All of this is pre-moistened, which is nice. So that's like one step I don't have to worry about. And then I'll be adding vermiculite at the end just to make it lighter and fluffier. And then here I have a, I think it's like a 2mm by 2mm hardware cloth. It's just an extra square that we had around our yard. And this is what I have been sifting all of my soil blocking mix and now my seed starting mix through. It can be a little fussy, but it's big enough that it's easier to work with. And ideally, I'll have my son put this inside of a wooden frame so that it's more sturdy and can just sit right here on top of my wheelbarrow, which is what I'm using to mix the soil blocking in. So I'm just going to start by pouring out some of this manure into the top, and I'm basically doing like a half and half. So like 50% manure, 50% peat moss to start with. So I'll be using my spade to kind of push the material through the hardware cloth. And I will tell you, unless you've got it in a frame, you can't put a ton on top because it'll just sink right through. So just put a little bit at a time. It's sort of a tedious process, but that's why I do a lot all at once. So I only have to do this process once, and I'll store it in a trash can or in a big plastic tub. That has worked perfectly, and it allows me to use it over and over and over again without having to repeat this process. So I thought I'd show you here just kind of the difference between the unsifted compost versus the sifted. Now, specifically with compost, whether it's mushroom compost or manure compost, you're just going to find little chunks in here. It's just par for the course, which is why you want to take the time to sift it. So you can see how chunky this is. And then once I sift it, it has just a really nice, fine texture. You can see how much nicer and finer that is. It just makes it a lot easier to work with. So you can see here what's left are lots of big chunks. And some of these are actually the compost that need to just be broken down. But if I had left that in the actual little pot, it would take up so much space and the roots really wouldn't be able to give me nutrients from this necessarily. But you can see a lot of wood chips and things. So it's just a really good idea to sift your soil if you're making it on your own. And honestly, even if you're not, unless you're buying seed starting mix, this is a lot of times what you're going to get. Okay, so I also wanted to show you the peat moss that I've sifted here. Now, peat moss should literally just be peat moss. But as you can see here, there's a ton of wood chips and like chunky pieces of hard material here. So just don't ever assume, even if it says 100% peat moss, that is what you're getting. Now I have bought some bags of peat moss this season that have been perfect, like perfectly fine, just peat moss. And so I am preferring that brand over this brand that I have here because I wouldn't have to sift that other one. And after one use of it, I knew that every bag was going to be the same. So just don't ever assume. If you're using this for like potting soil or put in the garden, that's totally different because this stuff could break down over time. But in tiny little seed pots, this is not what you want. So sift your stuff before you assume, or at least do like a small sample of it. You don't have to do this big of a thing to know if your material is fine or not. Just do it in a small, over a small pot if you're just wanting to test it out and make sure. Okay, so I have all of my peat moss and my composted manure sifted and in the wheelbarrow, and now I'm going to add my vermiculite. And I am totally eyeballing this, but I'm going to guess probably maybe half the bag, really just until I get kind of the consistency I'm looking for. So I will have my daughter Kenley come over here and watch as I stir this in. You can use vermiculite or permiculite. I just tend to like vermiculite better. So I'm just going to dust it on top here, like so. Yeah, there is, as you can see, that dust kind of flying up. So you want to be outside for something like this so you're not inhaling all that dust. If you're doing this during the winter, maybe do it in the garage or just dress warmly. So I'm going to stir it in. And you guys kind of look at what potting soil looks like. I mean, it's got a fair amount of the vermiculite or permiculite in it and balanced with the other. I'm stirring that in, make sure I'm getting all the way to the bottom. I don't want to use my hands, but I might have to. And I'm starting to get that really nice, lightweight texture that you want in your seed starting mix. It's starting to feel really nice. And the fact that this is pre-moistened is really nice because that means I don't have to pre-moisten it. I can just take it directly to my trays and start filling them up, which is all our next step. So you can see from my hands that it's not real clay-like. It's not like just teeming with moisture. That's why my hands are staying fairly clean. So that's kind of the texture I'm looking for. Not dry, but not sopping wet either. I probably could add a little bit of water to this, but it feels pretty good to me. I've been doing this a while. This is sort of you can see that it'll clump if I squeeze it. So it's not completely powder, it's not completely dry. It holds its form just a little bit. So it's kind of what I'm looking for. So I would say that this is a probably 50-50 mixture of peat moss and compost. You probably could go heavier on the peat moss, but I'm gonna just estimate here and say 50-50 peat moss, and then probably like 25% vermiculite, so half of whatever you did, if not even a little bit less. This is a 8 dry quarts or 8.8 liter bag of vermiculite, and I used a little more than half of it. So I'm gonna save the rest of this for my next batch. That's probably just enough, and we're gonna get started with putting these in the trays. So these are trays that I've had for a couple of years now. It is a 5x8, so I can get 40 plants in here. So I'm gonna be putting one variety of seed per tray. I've learned the hard way not to mix them unless you put a label in every single cell. You're gonna get them mixed up. I've tried so many different ways, and every year I get a cell or a tray mixed up. So even if I don't fill all of these cells, if I'm only needing 20 of a certain variety, I am not going to fill the other half up unless I want to take the time to label every single cell, and you may have the time to do that, but I don't. And I actually want that many sunflowers because I'm going to be trying to sell these at the farmer's market. And so if you have a single stem sunflower, it's good for one use, right? So we'll cut it down and then we'll pull it out, and we're going to be starting these every week throughout the summer until 50 days before our last frost. So I'll be cooking, I think I'm starting 2 varieties of sunflowers today. So I'll be putting one variety in this tray, one variety in another tray. And then when I get to like my cucumbers, I'll just probably do half. And even if I don't use all those, I can sell them to friends. So this is how I fill them up. So you can use your hands. If you're in a big wheelbarrow like this, it makes it super easy and not messy. And I just put it in there and even it out. And then I'll take 2 fingers and push it down like so. I don't want it too firm, but I also don't want a ton of air in there, because once you put water in, the air gaps will cause the soil to move around more than you want. Now the plus is if you're using big seeds, it's not as big of a deal as if you were using tiny little seeds, but I still want to get some of that air out of there. And then I'll just fill it one more time, and I won't have to press down this time, and I'll show you why. Because now I'm going to put my seeds in. So just shake that up a little bit. This one kind of a little too loose. Get a little shake, even it up, and now we'll put our seeds in. So these are pro-cut sunflowers. I have really enjoyed the pro-cut sunflowers. I started growing them last year per the recommendation of Lisa over at the Gardener's Workshop. These are seeds from the Gardener's Workshop, although this is not the only place that you can get pro-cut sunflowers. Harris Seeds is another great place to get more if you're looking for more than 50 seeds per packet. If you're doing a larger amount of sunflowers, Harris Seeds is a great location. But anyway, there's 50 in here, which is plenty for what I'm doing right now. And all I do is pour them into my hands. I'll just set 1 seed per cell, and I'll set them out first. I like to get them all laid out, and then I like to press them in all at the same time, and then I like to water them all at the same time. I just find it makes the process much quicker. Okay, there's that. And then all I'll do is I just press them really good down into the soil, maybe like a 1/2 inch down. And I'm not even going to cover them, because when I water them, the soil will cover them up themselves. So I don't want to push them too far. Just gently push them in. About a 1/2 inch, maybe even a 1/4 inch would be a better spacing. I lost a seed. Oh, there it is. Okay, and then I'll show you how I water it in. So I'm just gonna take a watering can like this that has like the multiple holes, so I get a gentle spray. I don't want to do like a single spray on there because it'll displace the seed. And I'm gonna be about a foot above it, so it's a nice gentle wash. And I'm just gonna go across, and I'm gonna let that water soak in. Then I'm gonna go across again, let that soak in, and I'll do one more time, and that should be good. So once I can tell all the water is in, then I do one more nice soak. I will literally just put this tray, once the water is nice and soaked in, I will put it on my seed mat, and as soon as 50% or more seeds have germinated, then I'm just gonna set these outside on my back porch. I have a shelf that I'm putting plants on to harden off. I won't even leave these in the house. They'll just be outside until they're ready to go out in the, he's gonna hurt himself on that. It's very pokey. Until they're ready to go in the garden. That's the really nice thing about starting seeds after your last frost, is that you don't even have to have them in your house other than putting them on a heat mat. And then in 2-3 weeks, these will be ready to go outside. Pretty simple. That took me in total probably a couple minutes to do that. And I've got multiple more trays to go, but at this point, this part of the process, it's super quick and super easy. And that's it. So I'm going to fill up some more trays, start up the rest of my cucurbits, and I'll be done for the day. And after today, I will start sunflowers every week, hopefully on the same day of the week, and that way I'll have a steady supply of sunflowers throughout the summer. So thanks for joining me today here on Pepper and Pine Garden Design in Little Pine Farm. My name's Landon Gilfillan, growing gardeners in their gardens. And we'll see you in the next video.